Um, when they allocated the topics for this workshop, I think I drew the short straw. Is this one the one?
Just for the video.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. Yeah. This topic is, needless to say, a bit esoteric, so I hope you excuse me if I simplify it to something that can fit in the time allocated to me. Discounting is a step in the cost-benefit analysis process that is about recognizing the time value of money. And I might actually just make a couple of quick comments about how it fits into cost-benefit analysis. So I think of cost-benefit and practical cost-benefit analysis consisting of 7 steps. The first step is identifying the problem or the opportunity, identifying possible solutions, and the counterfactual. And I think of the counterfactual as being what would happen if the particular proposal didn't go ahead, if you did nothing, or the do minimum situation. The second step is identifying the winners and losers. The third step is identifying the benefits and the costs that, in other words, the impacts on those people that have been identified. The fourth step is quantifying benefits and costs to the extent that you can. Now, some things are hard to quantify. I would say a lot more is quantifiable than people think. It's really a question of how accurately you can quantify. Few things, if you use ranges instead of numbers, few things are such that you can't put a range around a probable range of values. Nothing has a range that is infinite, or very few things do. The fifth step then is to discount the benefits and the costs to the present, and then you compare the benefits and the costs. Only then can you compare the benefits and the costs. And that's the main thing I'll be talking about. The sixth step is to stand back and look at your results and decide whether they're meaningful or whether you need to do more research, or whether it is worth doing more research, given the constraints of resources and time and so on, and also the nature of the problem that you're dealing with. And the seventh step, and this is a non-trivial step, is writing the report. Because that is the communication vehicle. You have to communicate your analysis to the decision makers. And it's surprising how many cost-benefit analyses are 70 or 100 pages long, and you don't find anywhere a nice little summary of what the benefits and the costs are. So you need a summary table on one piece of paper that says what the benefits and the costs are. And very importantly, if there are unquantified benefits or costs, they should also be there, because the decision maker needs to balance those that you have been able to quantify against those that you haven't. Okay, discounting. So the basic, I'm just going to make a few comments about what discounting is about. The basic idea is that costs that incur in the future hurt less than costs that have to incur now. And the same with benefits. As every child knows, a benefit now is worth more than a promise of a benefit in the future. Discounting can have big impacts in the water space. Most infrastructure has big upfront costs and produces benefits that are spread over a long period of time. Think of urban water supply infrastructure or irrigation schemes. Discounting is also relevant in the regulatory area. Section 32 of the RMA requires cost-benefit analysis of significant policy statements and plan changes. For example, if a limit for nitrogen discharges is introduced, then that can impose significant immediate costs on farmers, but the benefits to the community could be a long time in the future. Discounting was picked out as a topic for this workshop because it can have a bigger effect on the outcome of the cost-benefit analysis than any other element in the cost-benefit analysis. discounting, of course, is only possible in respect of costs and benefits that can be quantified. So some important benefits can't be quantified, and they mustn't be forgotten, as I said before. They need to be kept in mind, and they need to be put in front of the decision maker. Okay, so what is discounting? So I'm going to start really basic. Supposing that I'm obliged to pay you $1,000 now, $1,000 in a year's time, and $1,000 in 2 years' time. And let's just suppose there's no risk. You can trust me 100%. How much is each of those payments worth to you? So the first payment, that's quite easy. The $1,000 that I have to pay to you now is worth $1,000 to you. That's pretty obvious. Now, what is the second $1,000 worth to you? What is it worth to you now, given that I'm going to give it to you in a year's time? So I might say to you, supposing I give you that second $1,000 now, will you give me a discount? And so you have to think, well, what kind of discount would leave you indifferent between getting the money now or getting it in a year's time? And so your thought process will be, well, if I get the money now, then I can put it in the bank and I earn 4%, and so I'll have 4% more in a year's time. And so obviously, as long as what I have in a year's time is not less than what I will get in a year's time, then I'd be indifferent. So if you do the maths, if I give you $925 now, then that would leave you indifferent, because 925 at 4% gives you $1,000 in a year's time. Okay, so the $1,000 is worth $925. So the discount is $75, and the discount rate is 4% in this case. That's all it is. That's the discount rate. Now, what's the third lot of $1,000 worth? Well, it's the same kind of thinking, except that if you put it in the bank, it will be compounding over 2 years. It'll be in the bank for longer, so you'll get more. So you can afford to give me a bigger discount if I give you the money now. And if you do the maths, it's $889. And as you can see, the further in the future the payments, the less they are worth now. And if I plot those numbers, those values on a graph, I get a downward sloping curve. So along the bottom axis we got the years, and on the vertical axis we got the values. As you can see, it declines. The values in the future are worth less than those in the near term. And so that's on the basis of a 4% discount rate. And if I use other discount rates, you can see the result there. If it's a 2% discount rate, it declines less, and if it's an 8% discount rate, it declines by more. So what discount rate should we use? Someone asked that question. Well, the Treasury recommends 8%. 8% real. Why? Well, to put it in a nutshell, it's because although we can only get 4% in the bank, studies of long-run returns of the share market show in the long run we get the share market produces 8% per annum, pre-tax. So John talked about opportunity cost, and that is the fundamental concept here. The opportunity cost of our money is that we put it in the best alternative, and one of those alternatives is the share market, and we could be earning 8% there, at least as a nation, if you include the tax. And so that is the opportunity cost of money. It's certainly the opportunity cost of government money. Now, infrastructure seems to have a slightly lower risk. And so the Treasury currently recommends 7% for infrastructure. 7% for infrastructure, 8% is the default rate which you use for projects that are kind of hard to categorize, but very broadly have a similar risk characteristic to the market as a whole. People often say, but the government doesn't invest in the share market. Well, it could. In fact, it does actually. It does through the New Zealand Superannuation Fund. It does through the ACC. And it could invest a lot more through those avenues if it had money to invest. As you know, after the financial crisis, global financial crisis, the government stopped contributing towards the New Zealand Superannuation Fund. But it also has another choice. It could return the money to taxpayers by taxing them less, and they could invest in the share market. So that's the opportunity cost idea. That is what the money is worth to the government. And so everything has to be measured against that, because that is the alternative way of, that is the alternative to investing in whatever project is being considered. Now, I'd like to say two more things. People often object to high discount rate because they think it devalues future benefits. I think that there's a better way of thinking about it. It goes as follows. When you invest money, an investment is about building future wealth. I don't mean just monetary wealth. So enhancing the environment is also building future wealth in the sense that economists use the term. If I invest, but just sticking to what we can measure easily, if I invest $100 in the share market, that is to say in a productive business, which and suppose I reinvest, and suppose the business reinvests the profits every year for 20 years, then at 8%, if the share market returns 8%, then at 8%, the $100 will grow to $466 in 20 years. In other words, the $100 will create $466 of wealth in 20 years' time. That's our opportunity cost. Now, some public sector projects produce bigger benefits than that. And then, of course, they should be preferred. They should be carried out. But let's look at the case where a public sector project produces less wealth, where it only stacks up if a lower discount rate is used. Okay, so suppose that the public sector project produces a total benefit of $200 after 20 years. Suppose also that we have been able to quantify all significant benefits. So the project will produce benefits that exceed the costs if we use the 3.5% discount rate. Remember that if we have done the cost-benefit analysis properly and have valued benefits correctly, then $466 of, say, consumer goods are worth more than $200 of benefits from a public sector project. So if we invest in a public sector project that has a lower rate of return, then we create less wealth than what we could create. Why would we want to do that? The only reason I can think of is that if the public sector project has more merit, if the benefit it produces is worth more. But that contradicts the assumption I just made, that the benefits have been valued correctly and on the same basis. That brings me to the second thing I want to say, which is that while a lower discount rate might get the project over the line in terms of the ratio of benefits to costs, as this picture illustrates, it doesn't actually mean that you should choose it. You should still compare the public sector project with the private sector project, because that is your alternative choice. In this case, the comparison is simple and obvious. But that won't be the case if the benefits are distributed unevenly over time. The way to compare the projects is to do a cost-benefit analysis using the same discount rate for the two options. In most cases, it doesn't actually matter too much what discount rate you use. Let's suppose we did use 3.5%. The public sector project discounted at 3.5% has a present value of $101, which is more than the cost. So you might think, oh, that means we should carry out the project. But if we discount the private sector investment using the same discount rate, we get a present value of $234, which is more than what we get from the public sector project. So we would be better off putting our money there. So I hope this shows that fiddling with a discount rate doesn't actually help to make a project more attractive, provided that you always compare it with the alternative on a like-for-like basis. So in conclusion, first conclusion is the discount rate doesn't actually make as much difference as people think to the ranking of projects. In most cases, there are exceptions. And the second conclusion is that 8% is convenient because, firstly, it reflects the opportunity cost of capital, and secondly, it avoids the need to do a cost-benefit analysis on the alternative investment. For example, a share market investment. Thank you.